2 empty seats. That is what faced me when my name was called at New Haven Green. No flowers, no cameras, just 2 cards with names. My parents' names fluttered slightly in the breeze. Meanwhile, the Miss Oklahoma finals were blaring 2,000 miles away. Hours later, a single photograph posted by my cousin flipped our town upside down. The perfect family finally met the truth. Church whispers started immediately. Community pages were set on fire. As for me, I didn't argue with anyone. I didn't chase after them. I made one key decision that changed everything forever. Do you want to know how the applause at my graduation became their moment of reckoning? Stick with me, because the next 10 minutes explain exactly why I never looked back. Where are you watching from? I was born and raised in Willow Creek, Oklahoma. It is a small town where everyone knows your story before you even live it. Sundays were reserved for church, Wednesdays for local gossip. Every family had a specific role to play. Ours was supposed to be the perfect one. At least, that's what my mother worked so hard to make people believe. My mother, Carol Sterling, used to be Miss Oklahoma back in the 80s. She never truly gave up the crown. She simply traded it for a family she could put on display. To her, beauty was sacred, not just superficial. She called it the Sterling legacy, as if it were a royal bloodline passed down through smiles and sequins. My father, David Sterling, owned a small auto repair shop on the edge of town. He was quiet and soft-spoken. He was the kind of man who believed silence maintained peace. He rarely contradicted my mother. When he did, it ended with that weary phrase he always used, "Let it be live." As a child, I thought those words meant love. As an adult, I realized they meant surrender. Then there was my sister, Chloe. She was 6 years younger and the sunshine of the Sterling family. Mom said she had a smile that won over rooms. Chloe grew up immersed in ruffled dresses, tiny glitter crowns, and posture lessons. I, on the other hand, grew up behind the curtain, zipping up her gowns and carrying her high heels. I wasn't bitter, not at first. I just believed that if I worked hard enough, my mother would eventually notice me too. I was the quiet one who earned straight A's, won debate trophies, and had an obsession with law books. But whenever I showed her another certificate, she would say, "That's nice, honey, but remember, confidence is what makes you beautiful." It took me years to realize that in her definition, beautiful meant worthy. Our house was a museum dedicated to her glory days, photos of her pageant wins, then my sister's junior crowns. My face only appeared blurred in the background, wedged between their bright smiles. The truth is, I stopped trying long before Yale. I learned to build my pride in silence and celebrate totally alone. When my acceptance letter arrived, I thought maybe I had finally earned a spot in that family portrait. But when the big day came, and the applause rose while those 2 front row chairs sat completely empty, I understood. Perfection was never the truth. It was simply the story my mother marketed to the town. For the first time in my life, I stopped wanting to be included in it. Yale was supposed to be my clean slate. It was the one place where the Sterling legacy did not exist. In New Haven, no one cared who had worn the Miss Oklahoma crown. The only things that mattered were what you could prove, on paper, in class, in court. For the first time, I felt like people saw my mind, not my physical presence. Still, every achievement came with a quiet echo. Would she even notice this? Would she care? So, a few months before graduation, I did something I had promised myself I stopped doing. I tried again. I spent 2 weeks drafting the perfect message. It was polite, short, and hopeful. The graduation ceremony will be June 10th at New Haven Green. It would mean the world to me if you and Dad could come. I have already booked your hotel and bought your flights. Love, Maya. I hovered over the send button for a full minute before finally pressing it. Then I waited. A day passed. Then 2. Then 5. Finally, her name lit up my phone. June 10th is the Miss Oklahoma finals. Chloe has worked so hard for this. You understand? 4 words. You understand? They burned hotter than any insult. It was not even a real question. It was a command. It was an assumption that I would back down, that I would keep playing my usual role. The daughter who understood. The silent background character in her perfect life. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred entirely. Then I turned my phone face down. Outside my dorm window, snow fell in slow, quiet spirals. It was the kind of silence that does not comfort, it cuts. That night, I walked to the law library. This was the place where I had built myself, piece by piece. Between the towering shelves of law journals, I found my old journal. I started it back in Willow Creek when no one ever clapped for me. I flipped through the pages filled with small victories and personal notes. I stopped on a quote my grandfather, Judge Arthur Sterling, had once written. It was in his careful handwriting. You don't need anyone's spotlight to be seen. Just stay whole. I sat there for a long time tracing those words. Something in me shifted permanently. It was not an explosion. It was a quiet, irreversible tilt. Maybe I would never earn her applause. Maybe I would never be the one who shines brightest. But I could definitely be the one who stops begging for light. So I folded the graduation invitation. I placed it inside the back cover of that journal. I whispered to no one, "You wanted me to understand, Mom." Fine. I finally do. Clarity filled me, not anger. That clarity was the real beginning of everything that came next. The night before graduation, the air outside my dorm smelled like rain and lilacs. Inside, my suitcase was half-zipped on the bed. It held black heels, my crimson gown, and one empty envelope where family photos should have been placed. For weeks, I had pretended not to care about their absence. I told my friends my parents were just too busy to make the trip. I said this with a smile sharp enough to hide the pain. But that night, as the clock moved toward midnight, the truth finally settled in. They were not coming, and I was genuinely not surprised. I opened my phone one final time. The message thread with my mother was short and lifeless. "You understand?" Still glowed there, like a scar I could not erase. Below it were a string of unread texts from my father. They were all simple and safe. "Proud of you, kid." No punctuation. No calls. Just his same old silence wrapped in politeness. I did not reply to any of them for the first time. Instead, I scrolled through my photo gallery. Snapshots of long study nights, debate wins, and campus winters. Then, I reached the specific photo I had taken weeks earlier. It showed 2 empty chairs under the Yale banner during a ceremony rehearsal. Something about that image stopped me cold. I stared at those chairs until a single thought appeared. It was soft but absolutely certain, if they won't sit there, I will. That is when I began to write. Not a text message, and certainly not a desperate plea. I wrote a speech. Every word I had swallowed since childhood poured out of me, the years of feeling invisible, the heavy burden of always being the one who understood. But the tone was deliberate, not bitter. It felt like closing a heavy door gently, one last time. When I finished, I folded the speech neatly. I slid it into the same envelope that had once held their invitations. The envelope that once asked, "Please come," now held the account of what happens when you do not. I packed the journal my grandfather, Judge Arthur Sterling, had given me. His words were tucked between the pages, "Stay whole." That was the only thing I needed to carry with me. Before turning off the light, I did one final thing. I opened my contacts. I scrolled until I found my mother, then my father. Without hesitation, I pressed delete. It was not dramatic or done for revenge. It was reclamation. The quiet kind. The kind that makes room instead of making noise. Outside, the rain started to fall. It tapped softly against the glass. I lay there listening, realizing it was no longer a storm. It felt like a cleansing. By morning, I knew exactly who I was walking for. Not for the 2 empty chairs waiting in the front row, but for the girl who had finally stopped waiting to be acknowledged. The morning of graduation, New Haven Green looked like a postcard. Sunlight spilled over the brick buildings. Flags fluttered in the soft June wind. The air smelled of old books and blooming magnolias, the kind of scent that marks both an ending and a start. I dressed slowly. My crimson gown was crisp against my white shirt. Every sound seemed loud, the rustle of the fabric, the chatter of classmates, the brass band tuning up far away. Everyone had people waiting for them. Everyone but me. As we lined up to march, a girl behind me whispered, "Your parents must be so proud." I smiled. "Maybe," I said softly, "in their own way." When the ceremony began, the sound of applause rolled through the crowd like ocean waves. Names were called one after another. Every few seconds, there was a new burst of cheers. Families were shouting, waving, and crying. Then my name came up. Maya Sterling, Juris Doctor, Yale Law School. For one heartbeat, there was total silence. Then a few polite claps, "My friends, my professor." and one pair of hands I recognized instantly. I looked up. In the third row, Grandfather Arthur stood tall in his gray suit. The morning sun caught the silver in his hair. Beside him sat Ryan, the quiet medical student who had supported me through long nights of self-doubt and studying. When their eyes met mine, both men smiled. They were steady. They were proud enough to fill every empty seat around them. I walked across the stage, took my diploma, and turned to face the audience. 2 front-row chairs remained untouched. Name cards were neatly pinned, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. A small breeze caught the edges, making them flutter. It felt like the wings of something finally released. That was my closure. It wasn't triumph or revenge. It was just peace. But fate often has a sense of irony. That afternoon, I was sitting with my grandfather and Ryan near the Quinnipiac River. My phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Avery, who lived back in Willow Creek. She had posted a photo on social media. It was me on stage, sunlight hitting my face, diploma in hand, my crimson robe glowing against the blue sky. The caption simply read, "She did it alone." I stared at the picture for a long time. I felt something shift deep inside. It was quieter than pride, like the truth settling into place. By evening, the post had spread like wildfire. Willow Creek is not a big place. Gossip moves faster than weather. On that exact same day, June 10th, another event was streaming live, the Miss Oklahoma pageant starring Chloe Sterling. Across 2,000 miles, 2 spotlights were burning. One was built on applause. The other was built on silence. While my sister smiled beneath the stage lights, I was taking photos with my grandfather by the river. I did not know yet that the world was watching both of us. By nightfall, messages started flooding in. Old classmates, former neighbors, even church members who had not spoken to me in years. "Is it true your parents didn't show up? Carol was at the pageant the same day. Everyone is talking about this, Maya." I did not reply. I just scrolled, watching the narrative take shape on its own. Someone had created a photo collage. 2 pictures were side by side. Left, Chloe crowned on stage, tiara glittering, and my mother crying as she hugged her. Right, me at Yale, sunlight on my face, and the 2 empty chairs behind me. The caption read, "2 daughters, 2 stages, 1 choice." It was brutal. And it was true. Within hours, local news outlets picked up the story. Former Miss Oklahoma skips daughter's Yale graduation for beauty pageant. Comments poured in. Half were outraged, half stunned. Imagine missing Yale for a tiara. She raised 1 daughter to be seen and 1 to be forgotten. Maya didn't need the crown. She became it. By midnight, the town was split in 2, the believers and the deniers. Church forums buzzed. The Sterling family, once the model of elegance, had become the latest scandal. When my phone rang that night, I already knew who it was. My mother. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice burst through the speaker, sharp and trembling. "What did you do, Maya? Everyone is calling me a terrible mother. You humiliated this family." I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words echo. Ryan watched me from across the table, his eyes steady and calm. "No, Mom," I said finally, my voice low. "I didn't humiliate you. You just didn't realize what the truth looks like when it stands under the light." A pause. Her breathing quickened. "You think you're better than us now? With your fancy degree?" "No," I said. "Just freer." Then I hung up. She called again 5 times. I didn't pick up. By morning, the fallout had begun. According to Avery, the church women whispered in the pews, "Did you hear? She missed Yale for a crown." Former pageant friends distanced themselves. My sister Chloe's sponsorship offers paused for review. My father kept his head down at the garage, refusing to comment. For the first time, the family that lived for applause was being watched, and not in admiration. Ryan came over that evening with 2 cups of coffee. We sat by the window, scrolling through the chaos. He looked at me and asked quietly, "Do you feel sorry for them?" I thought for a long moment, watching the rain smear city lights across the glass. "No," I said. "But I don't feel angry anymore either, because in that strange, poetic way life works, I didn't need to fight back. The world had simply mirrored them back to themselves." That night, I went for a walk alone. The Quinnipiac River rippled with reflections of streetlights. I stopped by the bridge, breathing in the cold New Haven air. For years, I had believed closure would come with an apology or a confrontation. But it didn't. It came from knowing I didn't need any of that. The applause that filled New Haven Green was mine. The silence that followed was theirs, and I didn't have to trade one for the other ever again. A week after the story broke, I woke up to a short text from an unfamiliar number. "I'm in New Haven. Can we meet? Dad." I stared at it. It was the way you study a wound that's already scarred but still remembers the pain. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part, the one that still remembered the quiet man with grease-stained hands who used to leave folded bills on my desk, couldn't. We met at a small cafe near Yale Square. The city was wrapped in fog, soft and gray. He looked older than I remembered. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I was wrong, Maya," he said. "I thought keeping the peace meant keeping the family together, but all I did was let you fight alone." I said nothing. The truth didn't need my help anymore. He reached across the table, fingers trembling. "I don't expect forgiveness. Just thank you for becoming the person I didn't have the courage to be." I nodded once. That was enough. Later that evening, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Her voice was brittle and thin. "They're saying awful things about me," she whispered. "I just wanted Chloe to have the chances I never did. You understand, don't you?" The same words again. "You understand." But this time they didn't sting. They sounded small, tired, like the echo of a story that had finally lost its power. "I do understand," I said quietly. "You wanted applause. I just wanted a mother." She started to cry. I didn't. When the call ended, I didn't feel victory. Just release. The kind that comes when you finally stop expecting someone to change. That night, I visited Grandfather Arthur. He listened to everything, his hand steady over mine. "You don't have to forgive to be free," he said softly. "You just have to stop needing their approval." For the first time, I understood what freedom really meant. Not the kind that roars, but the kind that breathes. The world had already delivered justice. All I had to do was live it. A year later, the chairs were no longer empty. Not the ones at New Haven Green, but the two on my balcony in New Haven. One for me, one for Ryan. We sit there in the evening. Sometimes I think of Oklahoma, of the stage lights, the sequins, the crowns, the silence. But the memories no longer hurt. They just exist like chapters of a story I had already finished writing. I used to believe closure came from confrontation, but now I know it comes from peace. The kind you build quietly, until the empty ones don't matter anymore. When the wind shifts, I still hear my grandfather's words. "Stay whole, Maya." And I smile because I did. Maybe you've had your own empty chair moments when people you loved simply didn't show up. If you have, tell me where you're watching from tonight. You're not alone in it anymore.